Adolf Hitler, who he was and how he rose to power. Adolf Hitler was a failed artist and a former soldier who returned to a broken Germany after World War I. The country was poor, angry, and humiliated by defeat. He joined a small political party and quickly stood out because of his powerful speeches and ability to control crowds emotionally. By blaming minorities and promising national rebirth, he gained massive public support. He was legally appointed chancellor, and within a short time, he destroyed democracy and turned Germany into a one-man dictatorship. What made him hated and a true dictator? Once in power, he created a totalitarian state. Freedom of speech disappeared, opponents were arrested or killed, and propaganda controlled everything people saw and heard. His racist ideology led to genocide, concentration camps, and the murder of millions. He dragged Europe into World War II, causing unimaginable destruction and death. What started as national pride turned into mass suffering and global chaos, making him one of the most hated figures in history. How and why he fell. As the war turned against Germany, his power began to collapse. Allied forces surrounded the country, cities were destroyed, and his promises of victory became lies. Trapped in a bunker in Berlin with his empire completely defeated, he chose to end his life. His fall showed that fear-based power cannot survive reality. What happened to the country after his fall? After his death, Germany was left in total ruin. The country was physically destroyed. Its cities were in rubble. Its economy collapsed, and millions of people were homeless. Germany was divided into 4 zones controlled by the Allies: the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and France. This division later turned into 2 separate countries, West Germany and East Germany, which became symbols of the Cold War. But something very important happened too. Germany was forced to face its past. Nazi ideology was banned, war criminals were put on trial, and the country began a long process of rebuilding, not just its economy, but its identity. Over time, West Germany became one of the strongest economies in the world, while East Germany remained under strict control until reunification in 1990s. Benito Mussolini, Italy, who he was and how he came to power. Benito Mussolini was originally a journalist and a socialist, but after World War I, he shifted towards extreme nationalism. Italy was in chaos, economic crisis, unemployment, anger over the war, and fear of communism. Mussolini used this instability perfectly. He created the Fascist Party and built armed groups called Black Shirts, who attacked political opponents and intimidated the public. In 1922, he organized a famous march on Rome. It wasn't a real military coup, but it was a massive show of force. The Italian king, afraid of civil war, appointed Mussolini as prime minister. From that moment, Mussolini slowly destroyed democracy, banned opposition parties, controlled the media, and turned Italy into a one-man dictatorship. He called himself Il Duce, the leader. What made him hated and turned him into a dictator? Mussolini ruled through propaganda, fear, and violence. He censored the press, imprisoned or killed critics, and turned Italy into a police state. Everything was about loyalty to him. Schools, newspapers, and even children's organizations were used to worship his image. His biggest mistake was his obsession with glory. He wanted to recreate the Roman Empire. That pushed Italy into disastrous wars, the invasion of Ethiopia, full of war crimes, the alliance with Nazi Germany, entering World War II completely unprepared. Italian soldiers were sent to die in hopeless battles. The economy collapsed, cities were bombed, and people began to hate him, not just as a dictator, but as a man who destroyed their future. How and why he fell. By 1943, Italy was losing badly in World War II. The Allies invaded southern Italy, and Mussolini's own government turned against him. The Fascist Grand Council voted to remove him from power. The king had him arrested immediately. Germany later rescued Mussolini and placed him as a puppet leader in northern Italy, but he had no real power anymore. In 1945, as the Allies closed in, Mussolini tried to escape to Switzerland. He was captured by Italian resistance fighters. He was executed and his body was publicly displayed. The same man who once called himself Il Duce ended up humiliated, defeated, and abandoned. His fall was not quiet. It was violent, symbolic, and final. What happened to Italy after his fall? Italy was left broken and ashamed. The country had been dragged into a war it couldn't win. Its economy was destroyed and its people were traumatized. Fascism was banned and Italy became a republic instead of a monarchy. Over time, Italy rebuilt itself as a democratic nation, but Mussolini's legacy remained a warning. Italians today openly teach his crimes in schools. His rule is remembered as a proof of how easily fear and nationalism can turn a society into a dictatorship. Mussolini didn't just fall, he took Italy down with him, and it took decades for the country to recover from one man's obsession with power and glory. Joseph Stalin, USSR, who he was and how he came to power. Joseph Stalin was not supposed to be the main leader after Lenin. He was seen as a quiet bureaucrat, not a powerful figure. But that was exactly his strength. After the Russian Revolution, Stalin slowly positioned himself inside the Communist Party by controlling key appointments and eliminating rivals politically. When Lenin died in 1924, Stalin used manipulation, alliances, and behind-the-scene power to push out stronger personalities like Trotsky. By the late 1920s, he had total control of the Soviet Union. He didn't take power in the dramatic moment. He took it step by step, silently, until it was too late to stop him. He presented himself as the father of the nation, the man who would transform a backward country into a global superpower. And in some ways he did, but the price was unimaginable. What made him hated and turned him into a dictator? Stalin ruled through terror, absolute terror. He created a system where no one was safe. Politicians, military generals, scientists, writers, even his closest allies. During the Great Purge, millions were arrested, sent to labor camps, or executed. A simple accusation was enough to disappear forever. He forced massive collectivization of agriculture, which caused devastating famines, especially in Ukraine. Millions starved to death, while the state exported grain. Stalin built a massive cult of personality. His image was everywhere. School books, statues, he was portrayed as a godlike figure. People had to pretend to love him to survive. Under Stalin, the USSR became a prison state, powerful on the outside, terrified on the inside. How and why he fell? Unlike most dictators on this list, Stalin did not fall through revolution or execution. He died in 1953, but his death was surrounded by suspicion. He collapsed in his room, and his guards were too afraid to enter without permission. They waited for hours while he lay dying. That fear itself shows how terrifying his rule was. Even in his final moments, people were scared of him. After his death, something extraordinary happened. His own government turned against his legacy. In 1956, Nikita Khrushchev officially condemned Stalin's crimes in a secret speech. Statues were removed. His cult was dismantled. His image was erased from public life. Stalin did not fall physically in front of the cameras. He fell symbolically. The system admitted this was a mistake. What happened to the country after his fall? The Soviet Union entered a phase called de-Stalinization. People were released from labor camps. Fear slowly decreased. Society began to breathe again. But the damage was permanent. Millions dead, families destroyed, trust between people broken, the culture of fear that lasted decades. The USSR remained powerful, but morally damaged. Even today, Russia is divided about Stalin. Some see him as a hero who built power, others see him as one of the worst tyrants in the history. Stalin didn't just control a country, he controlled fear itself. And even after his death, that fear took decades to disappear. Saddam Hussein, Iraq, who he was and how he came to power. Saddam Hussein started as a member of the Ba'ath Party, a political movement that promised Arab unity, nationalism, and modernization. He was not born powerful. He climbed step by step using loyalty, violence, and intelligence work. In 1979, he officially became president of Iraq. But even before that, he already controlled the security forces and the intelligence system. The moment he took power, he eliminated his rivals in a single brutal purge. Senior officials were accused of betrayal, arrested, and executed. The message was clear. Opposition meant death. At first, many Iraqis saw him as a strong leader. Oil money was flowing. Infrastructure improved. Education expanded. Iraq looked like it was becoming a regional power. Saddam built his image as a modern Arab hero, but behind that image, a dictatorship was forming. What made him hated and turned him into a dictator? Saddam ruled through fear, torture, and absolute control. Any form of opposition was crushed instantly. His crimes included mass executions, chemical attacks on civilians, torture prisons, collective punishment of families. He dragged Iraq into two catastrophic wars. The Iran-Iraq War, 1980 to 1988, over 1 million deaths combined, destroyed Iraq's economy, created permanent instability. And two, the invasion of Kuwait, 1990, led to international sanctions, crushed Iraq's economy, pushed millions into poverty. While people suffered under sanctions and shortages, Saddam lived in palaces. He built dozens of luxury compounds, while hospitals lacked medicine. He built a massive cult of personality, statues everywhere, his face on money, his name in songs and textbooks. Iraq became a country where survival depended on silence. How and why he fell? After 9/11, the United States accused Saddam of having weapons of mass destruction and supporting terrorism. In 2003, a US-led coalition invaded Iraq. His army collapsed quickly, his government disappeared, he went into hiding. In December 2003, he was found in a small underground hideout, known as the Spider Hole. The man who once ruled with fear was now captured without a fight. He was put on trial by an Iraqi court, convicted of crimes against humanity, and executed in 2006. Saddam didn't fall in battle, he fell in humiliation, from dictator to prisoner. What happened to Iraq after his fall? Iraq did not become stable after Saddam. It entered chaos. The country faced civil war, sectarian violence, terrorist groups, political corruption, foreign interference. Millions were displaced. Thousands died after the war, even after the dictator was gone. This is one of the most painful lessons in history. Removing a dictator does not automatically save a country. Sometimes it opens a new chapter of suffering. Saddam destroyed Iraq while ruling it, but Iraq was almost destroyed again when he was removed. Muammar Gaddafi, Libya. Who he was and how he came to power. Muammar Gaddafi was a young army officer who took power in Libya in 1969, overthrowing the king while he was abroad. He was only 27 years old. At first, many Libyans saw him as a hero. He promised freedom from Western control, national pride, and social justice. Libya had massive oil wealth. He used that money to present himself as a revolutionary leader who would turn Libya into a powerful and independent nation. He rejected traditional government and claimed Libya was now a state of people. In reality, all power was in his hands. He didn't call himself a president or king. He called himself the brother leader and guide of the revolution. But behind these strange titles, he was a full dictator. What made him hated and turned him into a dictator? Gaddafi ruled through fear, violence, and total control. Opposition was illegal. Criticism meant death or prison. His regime was known for public executions, torture prisons, forced disappearances, assassinations of citizens, even outside Libya. One of the most infamous crimes was the Abu Salim prison massacre in 1996, where over 1,200 prisoners were killed in a single day. He also isolated Libya from the world. Accused of sponsoring terrorism, responsible for the Lockerbie bombing, international sanctions destroyed Libya's economy. While ordinary people struggled, Gaddafi and his family lived in extreme luxury. His children controlled oil money, businesses, and weapons. He built a bizarre cult of personality, strange outfits, female bodyguards, propaganda speeches lasting hours, a green book treated like a holy text. Libya became a country when one man's madness shaped an entire nation. How and why he fell. In 2011, the Arab Spring reached Libya. Protests began peacefully. Gaddafi responded with military force. He called protesters rats and promised to hunt them house by house. This turned the uprising into a civil war. NATO intervened, rebel forces advanced. In October 2011, Gaddafi was captured while trying to flee. He was beaten and killed by rebel fighters. There was no trial, no courtroom, no last speech. One day he ruled a nation, the next day he died in the street. What happened to Libya after his fall? Libya did not find peace. Instead, the country collapsed into civil war, armed militias, political division, foreign intervention, lawlessness. Oil wealth turned into curse without a central authority. This is one of the darkest lessons in history. A dictator can be destroyed in one day, but the damage he causes can take generations to fix. Gaddafi ruled Libya like it was his personal kingdom. When the king fell, the kingdom fell with him. Nicolás Maduro, who he was and how he came to power. Nicolás Maduro was not originally a powerful political figure. He started as a bus driver and a union activist before entering politics. His rise began when he became a close ally of Hugo Chavez, Venezuela's former president. Chavez built a system based on loyalty, not competence, and Maduro benefited directly from that structure. When Chavez died in 2013, Maduro was chosen as his successor. The election that followed was highly controversial, with allegations of fraud and heavy state control over media and institutions. From that moment, Maduro ruled a country that was already fragile, but he inherited absolute control over the military, courts, and state resources. What began as a constitution of Chavez's revolution slowly transformed into a centralized dictatorship. What he did and turned him into a dictator. Under Maduro, Venezuela collapsed economically. Inflation reached levels so extreme that money became almost worthless. Millions of people fled the country, creating one of the largest migration crises in modern history. Protests were violently suppressed. Opposition leaders were arrested or forced into exile. Elections lost credibility. Independent media disappeared. Food and medicine became scarce, while government elites lived in luxury. Over time, Maduro's rule became defined by total control of institutions, heavy military pressure, allegations of drug trafficking links, accusations of crimes against humanity. At that point, he was no longer seen as a president, but as a ruler holding power through fear. How and why his fall happened. In early 2026, multiple international reports stated that Nicolás Maduro was captured during a US-led military operation inside Venezuelan territory. According to these reports, the operation was fast, surgical, and aimed at removing what Washington described as a criminal regime leadership. Footage and images began circulating online, showing a man identified as Maduro under heavy military control. While some experts debated the legality and implications, major outlets reported that he was transferred to the United States for prosecution. This moment symbolized something massive. The dictator who once controlled an entire nation was suddenly powerless, not overthrown by elections, not replaced by negotiations, but removed by force after years of international pressure. What happened to Venezuela after his fall? After his removal, Venezuela entered a transitional phase. Sanctions began to ease, talks reopened with international institutions, oil negotiations restarted. The country moved from isolation toward reintegration into the global system. For the first time in years, hope returned. Markets stabilized, aid began flowing, new elections were planned. The country didn't magically heal overnight, but the atmosphere changed completely. Maduro didn't just fall. His entire system collapsed with him. Power built on fear always looks eternal, until the moment it disappears in one night. The Supreme Leader, who he is and how he came to power. He is the longest ruling figure in the modern Middle East without ever facing a real public election. He did not rise through popularity, business success, or military conquest. He rose through a system built on ideology, loyalty, and silence. After a major political revolution in the late 20th century, power in the country was divided into two layers: a visible government and an invisible authority above it. Over time, that invisible authority became the real power. Presidents came and went, parliaments changed, but the man at the top stayed. Not because people voted for him, but because the system was designed so no one could remove him. What turned him into a dictator? Over the years, the country became isolated from the world. Relations with the United States collapsed. Sanctions followed. Tensions with Israel escalated. Economic pressure grew heavier every year. Inside the country, Protests were repeatedly shut down. Journalists disappeared. The internet was restricted during unrest. Political opposition became almost impossible. Human rights organizations reported thousands of arrests during demonstrations. Families searched for missing relatives. Entire cities went silent during communication blackouts. Power was no longer about leadership. It became about control. Why his rule is considered fragile. The strongest dictators always look immortal until they don't. When governments begin cutting internet access, it usually means one thing: they are afraid of information. When communication is shut down, it is not strength, it is panic management. Around the world, people started asking, if a system is truly stable, why does it need silence to survive? Why does it fear cameras, phones, and connections? History shows the moment ruler disconnects his own people from the world is often the moment he has already lost control. What happens after figures like this disappear? No empires built on fear survives forever. Not Hitler, not Mussolini, not Ceausescu, not Gaddafi, not even Saddam. When absolute power finally collapses, borders reopen, voices return, economies rebalances, nations breathe again. The country doesn't heal overnight, but something more important happens. Hope becomes legal again, and for the first time in decades, the future stops being controlled by one man. Some dictators fall in courts, some fall in streets, and some fall when the world finally sees what they tried so hard to hide.